Okay, so let's open up Xcode here. And I was inspired by seeing something on Apple's news application. I thought, well, let's try to emulate that best we can. So I'm just gonna get up application here. I'm gonna go ahead and do a page-based app for iOS. I'm just gonna call this Olympics banner. And we're going to create this project. And I'm just going to put this in full screen. Is that going to change? All right, perfect. Okay, so I picked a page-based application because it puts in some boilerplate code. So on the main storyboard, Apple puts a root view controller and a data view controller. And it gives us a couple additional classes than normal. So we have a root view controller that has a lot of boilerplate code in it, along with a data view controller and a model controller. So I just want to run this. We'll just run it on an iPhone 8 Plus and see what it looks like. There's the simulator. And here's the application, and you can see it created some pages with the page flipping setting, and it displays all the months. So we should have about 12 pages there, and then we can flip back. Okay. What I wanted to show you was if this works, I should be able to go into Apple News and okay, so don't know if that's because that's there. Um, so during the Olympics, there's been a banner up here that had dedicated news stories for the Olympics. It had their medal count and things like that. I really wish on this simulator I could show it to you, but it's not showing up. So basically, I wanted to emulate that type of user interface, and primarily because there was also a animation in there where it looked like snow was actually falling behind the news articles. So I thought, well, let's go ahead and um, try to create that. And we're going to start off. This will be the actual banner. This um, page view controller. But one of the things I want to start off with is I want to change the way it is animating. So right now you can see this page view controller is getting a transition style of a page scroll, and what we want to do is we want to actually change it to a scroll. So we can take a look at their documentation here, and we can see that the transition style is a UI page view controller transition style, which should have two settings, page curl and scroll. The other thing I would like to see is the actual segments. So we have a delegate here, But what I want is I actually want something in the UI page view controller data source. So there's two methods down here, presentation count and presentation index. A page indicator will be visible if both methods are implemented. These will give you the little dots at the bottom of the page view controller. So we're just going to go ahead and grab those. And I'm actually going to go ahead and down here in my review controller, since it is doing most of my UI page stuff, I'm going to add an extension for my review controller. That is a UI page view data source. Is that what I wanted? I feel like that's not what I wanted. Yes, it is, but this isn't where I want to put that extension. My data view controller and my model controller is my data source. So I apologize. This is the class we want to extend. I'm going to put those two methods down there. I'm just going to take off this extra stuff. Go ahead and create a method here. Okay, so the presentation count is actually going to be the number of pages I have, which is this page data array. And the presentation index, which is the current index, is I'm just going to return the current one. We're going to start off this code actually will start off with the first page view. So let's go ahead and run this, and we should see a little bit of change. So now I've got my little dots down here, and it's now scrolling through these pages rather than doing that page curl. But that's simple stuff. I mean, that's basically all code that Apple gives you as a shell to start with for a page view controller. But we actually want something that looks like the news. Application. So we want basically a view where there's information down here, and then there's some type of banner up here that you can scroll through. So what we can do is we can actually create a container view. So this defines a region that can include a child view controller. So if we just plop that guy in here, go ahead and make him a little bit fuller looking. I'm going to go ahead and maybe give him some constraints. And then here, what I actually want to do is have him be my root view controller. I want to put basically his code and run it in this container. And I also want to make this guy my initial view controller. And I'm just going to also create a view controller. So this is going to be my new main. It's going to be UI view controller. Go ahead and create that so that he's going to start being my main view controller. Just in case I need to do anything, I'm going to go ahead and give him an outlet in that main, and this is going to be the event banner view controller. He just thinks it's a UI view, which is okay for me. And I marked him as that. So we're going to go ahead and run. I'm going to see what happens. Okay. So now we have this working. But you can tell that some things are a little different. I mean, my little index presentation count is missing. So let's go ahead and, oh, he thinks there's some missing constraints. So we're going to go ahead and let Apple tell us what the constraints should be for now. Okay, so he's a little bit bigger, but not exactly what I want it to look like. So let's try to keep the aspect. No, still doesn't like it. No, still not showing up there. I know I'm going to have another view down here, so let's just put it in place. Hmm. So yeah, it almost seems like the root view controller isn't displayed quite correctly. That's not what I wanted. Let's just give him a little bit more. Oops, that's not really what I wanted. Let's try this once more. That's not what it's grabbing the wrong. Okay. So again, it's scrolling through, the presentation index isn't showing up, but I'll fix that. Let's just move on from here because right now it has 12 different pages. But what I really like to do is I'd like to put a month on each, 2 months on each page. So that means I need to change the data source a little bit. And you know, I think one of the things that I'd like to do is just get rid of this. This guy, I want him to be blue because that's similar to what the news app is doing. And I guess for now, let's try to tackle the Snowflake animation that was happening behind the banner that was on top of Apple's news app. So for that, I'm going to create a new Swift file. Just call him a Snowflake controller. And for this, I'm just going to do core animation, nothing. There's a few ways I can think of to do this, using gravity or using this core animation. So we're just going to create a little struct here. Okay. We're going to create a lazy variable for an individual snow element. And of course, I forgot to actually create the cell. Okay, so I apologize. Okay, let's move on. So I've actually got, I just stole a little white button. We're just going to call that my little snowflake. We're going to go ahead and take a look at it. And it's way too big. So let's just make it a 50 by 50. There we go. Okay, so now I've got something and I'm going to change the name of it, and it's going to be called Snowflake. Alright, and then I'm going to say let cell Okay, so for now, I'm just going to create it very basic. Just get the contents of the image and create my cell. And then I want a function called add my layer to my view. Add it into the view, and we're going to go ahead and what I need is an emitter. So this is a particle emitter layer. Each emitter has an array of cells. Particle system is affected by timing. And there's a bunch of different things in a emitter layer that I can set. So I can set my cells. I can determine how often they birth a new cell, the lifetime, what position the emitter zone is, the size, the mode, velocity, the scale, and how fast they speed. So this is what this snow layer is going to be configured for. So for now, we're just going to say the snow layer dot position. We're going to create a point within the view. So the view that I passed has a frame and it has a size. And for now, I just want to get the width of that. And we're just going to play with that right there. And then for the y coordinate, we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to say, give me my frame size and my height. And the snow layer dot mode. We'll take a look at this a little closer. So I've got an emitter layer surface. I can do it from a circle. I'm going to go ahead and pick the surface. And most importantly, I want to do my emitter cells. It's going to be an array, and I'm going to say snow cell. And then I've got to add my snow layer. Okay. Okay, so cannot use mutating getter of immutable value self is immutable, so I left off a keyword that says we're going to mutate this struct. Okay, so now if I pass this a view, I will add my layer to it, and it will be a core animation emitter layer that has a cell with that little circle in it. So over in my main view controller, I can, after I load my view, as you can see, I have a view that's actually my page view controller. So I can say in that event banner, I actually want to say let my snow manager equal a Snowflake controller. And then I'm going to say snow manager, add to view, and I'm going to say pass it in my event view controller. And we're going to run that guy, and he's going to say that's a variable, not a constant. I usually start off with the word let just to see if it'll tell me that I'm mutating it or not. If it was a class, it probably wouldn't be affected by it. Okay, so it appears that there's no animation happening, and that's probably because I need to configure my cell some more. Cell dot birth rate equals, let's do 50 a second. We're just going to go ahead and give it a velocity. A velocity range, because we want it to be a little bit more random than them all falling at the same speed. Give it a lifetime. I'm going to go ahead and give my cell a color. I'm going to give it a little bit of a range. I want them to be scaled. And I want them to be scaled a little randomly. Okay. It's just some arbitrary values for these. We can go look at Apple's documentation and it'll give you an idea on what you really need to set up. I'm just looking at their documentation and just giving a bunch of arbitrary values for these. You probably won't be able to see a circle spinning, but okay, let's see if this does anything to our. Okay, whoa, okay, so we are emitting some stuff. They're huge, of course, and they're falling, but you can tell they're kind of different sizes and they're kind of coming out of the same little spot here. So I've got a little bit of work. You can see that they're a little transparent. I did that on purpose with this alpha component. Some of them should be darker than others. So we need to work on the size of these little balls. So we're going to change the size of these guys quite drastically because a scale of 1 is just too big. And the range is going to be like that. And so the position is the width and the side, the frame height. So I actually want this much higher. So let's see. Okay. So that looks a lot better than what it did before. So I've got my emitter position way up here, and it's kind of at the width of the frame. So we want to push it over to the left a little bit. So we're just going to go ahead and change our point to a little bit more to the left. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Some of the little dots it looks random. They're different sizes. They're different shades of white. That's good. And I can scroll through, and that basic animation just stays behind that view and lets me scroll through the different items. I know it still says month, but really these are different articles that is happening on the news app. But we actually don't have any content in here, and I've got 12 12 items in there, and I want to be able to condense them. I want to show a couple on each page. I don't want to just show one on each page. But the critical thing that I really wanted to show off was that animation happening in the background. And we could play around with different settings, because I could say, don't do this. Let's see what happens when I take out that velocity range. They really do appear all to be falling at that same rate of speed. So I was able to, what if I went up to, 20 on this particular element. You can see, some of them are actually getting farther apart from one another. And that's because, the velocity range is set. There's some x acceleration, there's some y acceleration. And you can play around with these different settings until you get them to that animation you like. There's also gravity built into Apple's framework. You could create objects that are affected by gravity. And I have a feeling that they're probably using that just because there's so many random effects you could do. We could create a wind gust and blow the snowflakes around using the other framework. And that's the UI gravity behavior. So if I just go back over to Xcode and say, I'm not going to do it here. But it's part of the dynamic behavior. We can add items to it, and we can give it different angles and magnitudes. So maybe we can work on that on another session. But for now, we've got that core animation in place, and we have a view controller separate from our regular view, and it is set up as a page view controller. But I want to actually make a few changes. So in order to do that, I actually need, I want my pages, but I also want each page to have a collection of items. So we're going to go grab a collection view. We're going to pop that guy in here. And I think I just want him to be the whole thing. I want him to be clear because I want to be able to see that come out. I want my data source to be that controller for now. I need an outlet in my controller. This is going to be events, information, collection view. Okay. just because I put those delegates in there, or those connections in there, I want to go ahead and tell him I'm going to be the delegate. And I want another extension. If you're not familiar with collection views, get used to them, because you can pretty much do anything, anything with them. They have built-in scrolling. You know, you can these are just a couple of extensions I generally always put in my classes that have collection views. Okay. Of course, I forgot the most important one. Data source. Gotta have my data source. And he should tell me that I've got to add some stubs. Yeah, there we go. So I'm just going to let him do his magic. So this is going to be what tells me how many items I can have in each. So for now, we're just going to stub this out, and I want to return to, and then of course I need a UI collection view cell. So generally when I work on a collection, I go ahead and create a new class that is a view controller cell. I'm going to go ahead and call this an event collection view cell. I'm going to create my user interface. I'm going to go ahead and create that guy. Okay. So it creates a class that has a UI collection view, and there's some awake from your nib where you can initialize the code, and then it creates a view builder where you can kind of add, you know, your own information. So what I'd like is probably for now, I'm just going to put that label in there. Just going to center it, and I'm going to reference it to my new class. I'm going to just call this a title. Okay. Whenever you're working with a collection view, you need to register those cells with your controllers. So if I look at events information view, there should be a register. Now there's different ways to do this. This is just the way I generally do it. I'll use this class. Then I usually say event collection view cell, and I'll tell it that I'm using my nib, and then I do the same thing over here, and I usually have a reuse identifier. Okay, that actually registers that nib with the view, so that you can reuse that same view each time you need to get one of these items. But for now, I need to go ahead and fix the missing stuff. So generally, I just put this kind of information in. So I'll have a static let nib equal UI nib, where I give it a nib name, which is your class. And I don't need to worry about the bundle. once you work on a lot of collection views, this stuff just becomes I just want a little identifier so that the collection view knows what it's referenced. You can do this via storyboard as well. This is all information where you can specify the reuse identifier, and then you can actually do you don't have to have this separate view. You can just do it all within your storyboard, but I generally just pull it out because chances are I may want to use this collection view in other controllers, and I don't want it to be hard-coded in a storyboard. But I do want to go ahead and tell this thing that when you instantiate, that collection view, it's going to be an event collection. I don't know if you necessarily have to do that. I guess we could try without it and see what happens. But back in your data view controller, we should have clean compile, at least on this line. Reuse identifier. Okay. All right. Now, when we are down here in this data source extension, this method is going to return for a particular item in your array, in your collection, a collection view. So we want to say let my cell equal, so it handy-dandily, it passes you the collection view you're working with, and then you can dequeue a cell from it. Again, this is kind of a simple collection. I could have multiple sections in here, all with a different cell, but keep that simple, and we can just say index path, and then we're going to return the cell. I'm going to see what happens. Set a breakpoint there, just okay. So we are hitting this. We should hit it twice. Okay, and it doesn't really show anything because I didn't put of course it should have put something in there. Let's make sure we're getting what we want to get. Okay, so within that cell, I'm just going to create a function that basically does the configuration. It's just taking a string. It could take an actual object and do a bunch of different so basically I just want to say set. Okay, what's it doing with that? All right. Oops. Okay, so it really did not like has no member configure. Okay, so it's still not. Let's see. Okay, there they are. They were just not sized properly, so we'll work on that. That's actually why I added another extension down here so that we can work on the size. But you can see we've got 2 items, January, February, March. Not exactly what I'm going for, but um, we're just building on top of what um, we started off with. So we'll make some changes, and we'll do that later. I'll try to be back this afternoon and continue this little demo of the banner snowing, showing information. I'll just go back over to Apple's little news and see. No, it still just doesn't show what exactly. Um, Maybe if I click on this, they'll. I don't know. I don't know why it isn't showing the Olympics. Let's keep showing this. Okay, so now it's showing me that. Well, if you go into your Apple News app, you may see a banner up here that has the different medal counts and things, and that's really what we were um, trying to emulate in our own app. So basically, we would have this banner here. You can scroll through it, and it's separate from this view controller down here. And we did that by creating that boilerplate page controller, creating a new view controller, embedding that container, um, embedding a container in our view controller that can have a child view controller. And so I've basically made this my initial view controller. I've embedded a container in there that is actually the root view controller. And then like down here, I could have, another view. It would probably be another collection, but we'll just make it something black. Give it that. You know what I think I'm doing is I think I'm covering it up. Probably not, but so yeah, you can see the snow in the background just a little bit because I changed this background. So then this probably should just be clear. My collection view. Okay. So we'll work on these cells a little bit more and then of course take out so that there's not 12 pages, there's actually just 6 and each one has 2 collections on them, and we'll work on that this afternoon. Thanks.